Hey everybody, I've never done this Facebook Live before. This is my first one, and I normally wouldn't do it, but I feel like this is probably a story worth sharing. As many of you've seen, I'm on my way to the first leg, or I was supposed to be on my way to the first leg of my month-long trip to Asia, and today I was flying out to go from Atlanta to Toronto to Beijing, China. So a quick backstory. This morning I woke up at about probably 5:30, and I made some eggs and bacon, and a good friend of ours, Miss Sandra Green, had a flight out this afternoon or around lunchtime, and she took me to the airport, dropped me off at the international terminal. And everything was fine. Checked in, went through security, got there about an hour and a half, 2 hours early for my flight, and everybody was super nice. Ended up boarding the plane in Atlanta. Sat by a wonderful guy. His name was Rich. We got to talk for a little while, and good connection to make. We kind of exchanged business cards there, and got off in Toronto and walked up to my gate, and I realized that my flight, which was supposed to take off at 2:55, was delayed until 6:40, and ended up getting delayed even further to 6:55 this afternoon. Well, we're on the Eastern time zone, and it's 8:49, which means that I'm supposed to be on an airplane right now, headed to China. I, as you can tell, am not in an airplane, not in an airplane on my way to China. Rather, I'm in a hotel room, and crazy circumstances led me to where I am right now. And you might not believe it when I tell you this story, but the moral of the story I'm about to tell you is that plans don't work out sometimes for the best, and that God's work is it's always going on in the background, whether you know it or not. So I'm at the gate at about 6:20, 6:21, and we're about to start boarding at 6:25. I called my mom, Sandy, and I was going to tell her that we were about to board. I mean, there are like 300, 400 people in this line to get on this airplane to go to Beijing. Most of them are Chinese, and barely any of them speak English. So I'm sitting there, and throughout the 5-hour layover that I had, I listened to music pretty much the whole time. Otherwise, I was talking or meeting people. And so my earbuds were stuck straight in my ear. I couldn't hear anything else. But for some reason, I guess I had my earphones a little bit outside my ear so I could hear what zones were boarding. Well, while I'm talking to Mom, I kind of overhear an announcement, which usually wouldn't strike me as strange. But they come over the intercom, and they say, "American and Canadian passport holders, please come see the Air Canada desk if you have trouble with your visa for your trip to China." I don't know why that struck me as strange, but I'm thinking in my mind, I do a lot of traveling, and I book all these trips on my own, I plan them all out, and in no way do I think I'm an expert on this whatsoever. But I was, just to make sure, I wanted to check with the desk. I go up to the desk, and there are about 5 people there, and I walk up. "Hey, I'm Hamilton Winters. Nice to meet you. I'm flying to Beijing on the delayed flight, and I heard your intercom call about a visa to China, and I wanted to check and see what my status was. I don't think that I have a visa for China." And all 5 of them gave me the look that I could only imagine to be the look that someone would give you if you told them that you were, like, God forbid, terminally ill. They looked at me with this dead stare, and the main guy, which the other 4 looked at that time, he looked at me and he said, "You don't have a visa to go to China?" And I said, I don't think so. I mean, can you sign me up for one of those? How would I obtain one of these visas to China?" And he looked at me and he said, where'd you come from?" And the guy kind of looked at the screen. He said, "He came from Atlanta." And I said, "Yeah, I came from Atlanta." He said, "How did you get to Canada?" I said, everybody was super nice. I had the green light to, get on every plane that I was going to board. I mean, in 10 minutes, I was about to board this plane to go to Beijing. He said, if you don't have a visa, you can't get into China. And I said, well, that's what I'm coming to you for. How do I get a visa? And he said, it's about a 2-week process. You have to correspond with the Chinese government, and they have to send you a visa. And I was like, well, we're about to board this plane in about 10 minutes. Can I get one in 10 minutes? And he was like, that's funny. He said, no, you can't. You're not going to China. And I was like, okay, well, what do I do from here? What are my options? And he said, well, you can get a hotel room here tonight, and you have to go to the Chinese consulate in downtown Toronto tomorrow and apply for an expedited visa. I said, okay, well, if I do that, how long is it going to take? I mean, can they approve me by the end of the day? He said, at soonest, it's going to be 4 or 5 days. I said, okay, well, if that's one of my options, what are my other options? He said, well, another option is you can, well, where else are you going on your trip? And I said, well, I was going to go to Shanghai next. And he goes, well, you can't get there either. That's, then they require a visa. And I said, well, then I was going to go to Hong Kong. And he said, well, you can get to Hong Kong without a visa. And I was like, well, what does that leave me, doing? He said, well, it's not your original destination. Our job is to get you from point A to point B, which was Atlanta to Beijing. I said, well, what do I do? And he said, well, I don't know how much you spent on that plane ticket to Beijing, but you're probably going to have to eat that cost. And then if you can, get a flight out to Hong Kong in the next couple of days, if you can. I said, well, that seems pretty expensive. And he was like, it's going to be pricey. So what's my third option? He said, third option is you cancel your trip altogether and you go home. And I was like, wow. 10 minutes ago, I had the green light to go to China. And now I'm sitting here possibly having to cancel my whole 28-day trip. And I don't know what to do. And about that time, I just kind of thought to myself, and I closed my eyes. This was in front of them. They probably thought I was crazy. And I was like, God, please somehow turn this into a good thing. I don't know how it's a good thing, but make it a good thing. And the next question was, how did I get here? And he said, well, we've had a lot of people not know you needed a visa to go to China. And I said, well, that makes me feel better, but I'm still here without a visa and I can't get on the plane that I paid to be on. He said, well, you're the first person I've ever seen get across the border without a visa to your final destination. He said most of the time it's people that show up at the Toronto airport to try to go to China, and they can't get to China because they don't have a visa. He said, so pretty much, in other words, you snuck into Canada. I was like, well, I never meant to sneak into Canada, but I guess I'm here now, and it's a beautiful place. You've really done nice around here. Everything looks pretty. And I said, well, okay. My other question, what do I do now? And he said, well, if I were you, I'd go talk to the customer service desk right around the corner and see what they can do for you. But that's about all we can do from here. And I said, okay, well, thank you for everything you've done. They all smiled and they were like, we're sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but that's what has to happen. So I turn around and I start walking towards the desk and I stop. And just for my own, I guess, pleasure of knowing the answer to this question, I turned around and I said, let me ask you one final question, then I'll be out of your hair forever. What would have happened if I would have gotten on that plane right there and I would have landed in Beijing, China? And he looked at me and he said, well, most likely they would have taken you at customs and they would have detained you and questioned you for probably a good 24 hours before making you buy a plane ticket to come back to the United States. And there's a pretty good chance that you wouldn't be able to come to China anytime soon after that, because you would be there illegally. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I must be the dumbest person alive. But, you know, whatever. Thank you so much for answering that question. And at that moment, I realized that, what did I say at the beginning of the video? Your plans change, but God is always working in the background somehow. So my mistake was, it potentially saved me from ending up in a Chinese jail in 15 hours from now. So that's not even the craziest part of the story. I walk over to the customer service desk, and I'm the second person in line. The first guy gets waited on, and I start talking to the lady at the desk, and I say, "Yeah, how you doing?" She says, "I'm fine. What can I do for you?" And I said, "Well, I'm kind of in a pickle here." And she said, "Well, what happened?" And I said, "Well, about 10 minutes ago, I was going to board a plane to Beijing. But I just found out that had I done that, I would be detained in China. So this is pretty much best case scenario for me right here, just standing at your desk asking you if you can help me complete my trip in some shape, form, or fashion." She said, "Well, that's unfortunate. You know, are you from Toronto?" And I said, "No." She said, "Well, where'd you fly from?" I said, "Atlanta." And she said, "How did you get to Canada?" And I said, "You know what? That's not the first time I've been asked that question today. I've been told that I snuck in accidentally, and I was about to do the same thing in China, and thank God I didn't." And she said, "Well, I've never heard that before." I said, "That's the second time I've heard that statement too." She said, "Wow, I'm amazed." And I said, "Well, I am too, but now I'm kind of stuck. What do I do? I'm in Toronto, and I've never been to Canada before, and I'm on my way to China. I was supposed to be on a plane about 20 minutes ago." She said, "Well, let's see what we can do." So before she starts typing, she said, I need to let you know, they probably already told you this, but best case scenario, you're going to have to eat the cost of that plane ticket. And we might be able to find you another flight out later this week, if at all possible. But it's going to be expensive. Are you okay with that?" And I said, "Well, if that's what I have to do, I can save up money. I can, you know, whatever." So she types on her computer for about 10 or 15 minutes, and I'm just thinking, like, please, God, let something happen, something good happen. And she's kind of looking at the computer screen, scrolling through, and it's not looking good. And she says, "Hold on one second." And so she walks over, and she grabs the phone, and she talks on the phone for like 15 minutes. And I'm sitting here, and I'm like, oh, please, 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 something good happen. About 15 minutes later, she walks over, and she looks at me, and she was like, and I was like, "It's not good, is it?" And she said, you must be the luckiest person alive." I was like, "Well, about, 30 minutes ago, I was thinking the exact opposite. So let me know what you're thinking, because we're on two completely separate wavelengths." She said, "My manager and I spoke for a second, and he agreed that it was Air Canada's fault in Atlanta for even letting you onto the flight to Toronto. Was it your fault that you didn't have a visa to go to China? Yes, but it's a mistake that's easily made. It was our fault at Atlanta that we let you on the airplane, and now you're stuck in Toronto." I said, "So what does that mean?" She said, "We have authorized you to have the last seat on the airplane out to Hong Kong in the morning at 10 a.m., and we are putting you in the Crowne Plaza Hotel tonight and giving you your dinner and your breakfast all comped for free because it was our fault." I don't even think I spoke for probably a good 15 or 20 seconds. I just kind of looked at her, and I was like, I have chill bumps telling this story right now, because it is the craziest thing that I think's ever happened to me. And I said, "How is that even possible?" And she said, somebody's watching over you." And I said, "Can I give you a hug?" And she said, "Yeah, sure." And I walked to the side of the desk, and I gave her a hug, and I said, "You have no idea what you've just done for me. This is a total God thing, because this trip could have been ruined from the start, but instead you have pretty much found a way to fix it." And I said, you and the other ladies at this desk right now have been such a pleasure to work with. I said, you've been answering other people's problems all day and trying to fix them, and I'm probably one of the last people that you've seen. You're trying to fix my problem, and you're an absolute pleasure to work with. I can't thank you enough. She said, absolutely. So she gave me the brochure, and so I checked into my hotel, and I'm in Toronto tonight. It's not where I expected to be. I expected to be probably halfway across Canada on an airplane to Beijing. And I would have been perfectly happy for 13 hours. I probably would have slept well. I would have watched some Netflix shows. I probably would have read some travel guides and been, all happy. But once that 13 hours after everything seemingly perfect would have happened, probably the worst thing that could ever happen to me or has happened in my life would have happened once I got to China. But because 10 minutes before I boarded that airplane, something told me to listen to that message. Something told me to go up to that desk and ask, just inquire about it. And to say a little prayer that somehow something good could come from something so bad. God saved me. He did. I don't know what else to say. I'm not any luckier than anybody else, but I can tell you one thing tonight. I'm feeling the most blessed person in the world. So anytime that you think that your plans aren't happening the way they're supposed to happen, maybe they're not. But then ask yourself whose plans those are. Because I was going to China on my plans. God had different plans. So tomorrow, we'll see. Tomorrow I'll be on an airplane to Hong Kong. I won't be visiting Beijing or Shanghai. We'll have to do that on another trip. God willing, I get to go. But I'll get a couple extra days in Hong Kong and maybe even another place if I have the funds to, add Cambodia or somewhere like that I want to go. But, let that be an inspiration to you, because it's been an inspiration to me that something bad can turn into something good. And the ladies out there know this, but men, it's easy for us to tell everybody when we're right. But I kind of struggled over whether or not I should come on Facebook Live and tell everybody that I messed up. I messed up. I messed up big time. But I was definitely humbled.